New murder charges have just been filed in the case of Celia Sweeney. The 28-year-old was last seen alive on February 28th at her apartment in Charleston. Mark Walton has now been charged with her murder. He is believed to be one of two men responsible for her killing. Celia had gone out on Thursday night on the 27th with a female neighbor and two guys. They went to some restaurants, they went to some bars, and Celia reportedly told a bartender that night that she was trying to ditch them so she could go home. I find that very interesting. That appears to be the last time that she was seen alive, and by Friday, she was not responding to texts or calls. She was supposed to go to work on Friday and she didn't show up, and friends said that that was very unusual for her. When you hear those very simple things, Luis, are you already concerned of foul play?
Absolutely. I mean, if it starts there, that's where this whole thing begins. Yeah, and bartenders and restaurant bar, they're trained, especially if you have locals that come in all the time with people sitting at the bar, especially females. If they feel uncomfortable, there's keywords or indicators that they have signals with the bartender that deal with on a regular basis. And this seemed to be a place that they had gone to before, and she was familiar, a local there. So that bell was rang, and that bartender made a mental note, which turned out to be really crucial later. Um,
So it turns out that her boyfriend was not one of the two men that she had gone out with that evening, but he had been texting and calling her in the morning and she was not responding. He found that really unusual. So the boyfriend went over to her apartment, and when he got there, he said there was blood everywhere and it appeared that there had been a struggle and her car was missing, so he called the cops. We do know that they did get a warrant, so they clearly must have thought that this was going to be the kind of case where they needed to preserve that crime scene.
right, right.
So when the police get there, they confirm there is blood everywhere. It definitely looks like something horrible went down. And later on, the medical examiner would say that she likely died of blunt force trauma to the head. So she likely died instantly. Let's break down what we know and go back. So according to the bartender who saw Celia with the two guys, that was late Thursday night into Friday morning. The bartender said that Celia was at the bar because it was the only way that she could think of to get the guys out of her apartment. So she's already sharing with the bartender, I can't get rid of these people. And she told the bartender, I'm going to leave. I'm going to skedaddle out of here without them knowing to go home. What's interesting is apparently, even if she did leave alone, she didn't end up staying alone. Somehow those two ended up back in her apartment somehow because Celia sent some text early in the morning, 3 a.m. Friday, complaining to her neighbor, the one who had been out with her, and some other friends, I can't get rid of these guys. They won't leave my apartment. So the last time anyone heard from Celia was 3 a.m. The last time anyone saw Celia was at that bar.
Right.
Okay? So those are the facts we have so far. The two guys she was with, it's really unclear how she even knew them, Luis. It's not clear where they were friends. Maybe they were friends of the neighbor. They've been identified as 32-year-old Buddy Carr and 36-year-old Mark Walton. Okay, at the scene, some interesting things were found. Do you want to go over some of that evidence?
Right. So, in addition to the extreme amount of blood that was located at the scene, there were boot impressions that left a pattern through the blood. So that's very indicative of somebody being there after the blood had spilled. There was also a shell casing located at the scene. And of course, your first thought is that maybe she was shot in addition to this blunt force. We just don't know. We also don't know for a fact that she died in that apartment. Yes, most likely, according to the pathologist, that's probably what happened, but we don't know for a fact that she did die there. We don't know for a fact yet that she didn't die by being shot. She may have even fired the round. Who knows what happened in there? We do know that Walton knows what happened in there.
Now, what if those bloody footprints, though, are from a common boot, that lots of people in their 30s are wearing? Is that the kind of thing that really could help police, though, locate something?
Well, shoe impressions, boot impressions are very, very common in crime scenes like this. So sometimes you may get a generic impression, but sometimes there's cracks, there's wear that is unique to that specific shoe, right side, left side, or even shoe size. So there's a lot of variables that can help pin it down to that specific shoe. And if you find that shoe, it's going to have blood on it. And I think they matched the shoe. They found the shoe.
They did. They ultimately did. They ultimately found that shoe. The man, Mark Walton, who's just been charged with her murder, he apparently had that boot and there were traces of blood. So that's another nail in his coffin. What's also interesting is that no one could find her cell phone. It was not there in the apartment. The police, best they could do at the time was to figure out the last pinging, and it said it was somewhere in or around the apartment at 11:30 that morning. I don't know what, if anything, that tells us. It could have just died at that time, right? The battery.
It's possible. It's possible. But they'll be able to ping that, I believe, and get a final resting point for that phone. We know she had it at 3 a.m. in the morning. So it sat there untouched probably until 11 a.m. or till who knows.
There's a lot we still don't know about this case that we're still waiting. So this is the information that we do know that's public, but I'm sure that a lot more is going to come out in the next few weeks and in the next few months. So back to her car. She drove an Audi and the car was missing. Turns out it was found the following day, abandoned in a parking lot about a half mile away. Witnesses and surveillance video from the area lead police to believe that the Audi S5 had been driven out of her apartment complex to this other place by a man, and that the Audi was being followed by a large four-door pickup, which also pulled into that parking lot. The guy who was driving the Audi gets out, gets into the pickup truck, and the pickup truck takes off. What's interesting here is that police were able to identify that pickup truck, and it belonged to Buddy Carr, one of the guys who had been out with her that night.
And I would add to that, Anna, that they also recovered video surveillance of that pickup leaving, her car leaving, and they timestamped it at 6 a.m. So now we know her last contact with anybody was at 3 a.m. The last time that possibly alive, whether she was in that vehicle or not, was 6 a.m. So you have a 3-hour window to work with. That's huge for the investigators.
It is. So now they know they're looking for Buddy Carr, obviously because he was with her, but also because of all this information they're getting about her car and the surveillance video. So they're looking for Buddy Carr. The cops in Charleston asked local police in Spartanburg County, which is about 200 miles away, to please do a check for them because they want to get to him as quickly as possible. When local police show up at Buddy Carr's house, they found that very same white pickup truck parked, and then they found Carr dead inside his house, dead of an apparent gunshot wound, self-inflicted. He committed suicide. Okay, he's dead. And now they start searching the scene and they find one of these big plastic storage containers, you know, the kind with the lid that it's like a big bin, if you will. They found that on the property, and inside this black container was the body of Celia Sweeney. Police think that Buddy Carr likely committed suicide probably not long after he arrived at his house and he put the bin with Celia in it outside, because the coroner thought he had been dead about 48 hours. So given the time frame, she was not found until Monday. So when the police went into Buddy Carr's house, they found more than just Celia's body and this bin. They start finding receipts of a trip to Home Depot in Charleston near Celia's house. They have receipts for things like latex gloves, concrete bags, camouflage nylon straps, and also the bin. So the cops go to Home Depot, they look at the security cameras, and they find video of the two of them, Walton and Carr, buying all this stuff, including that black bin that she was found in. So now we have the receipts, we have video of them. They bought that on the 28th, the day she went missing. So, Luis, does that make you think that they hadn't intended to kill her, but then once they did kill her, they said, oh, I guess we better buy some supplies, clean stuff up, get rid of the body?
Yeah, it sounds like it was a heat of the moment type thing. She had left him at the bar and they did not want their night to end. I suspect and I hope that there was not a sexual assault on top of this. And that'll already come with the autopsy. I'm sure we'll be able to confirm that. But it became very real to both these individuals, more real to Carr, that they were their own worst enemies. They left a trail. Thank goodness they weren't the sharpest knives in the drawer, because if they wanted to get caught, they did everything they needed to do to get caught. And thank goodness for that. We were able to bring this case to a closure much faster than usual.
Apparently, the police also looked at the traffic cameras along the interstate, and they actually found video of the pickup truck with the black container in the bed of the pickup truck. So the theory is that, again, we don't know for sure if she was killed in the apartment, but most likely because it was such a bloody scene. And then they stuffed her into this container and they transported her 200 miles away. I don't know if the plan was that they were going to bury her or what they were going to do with her. But with the amount of blood that was in that apartment, what in the world did these two think was going to happen?
Exactly.
No, not very smart at all. So when they find her body, they find Carr dead of suicide. Obviously, now they're looking for Walton, the other guy. Police go, they arrest him, they charge him with an accessory after the fact, and that's when they found the boot that seemed to match the tread at the apartment that had traces of blood on it. What becomes interesting is, as the investigation proceeds, and even though we have not been given a lot more information, Walton has now been charged with murder. They have upgraded the charges against him.
That makes sense. He was there.
Right.
It makes sense. I don't see why he wasn't charged in the first place, but they may have a tactical reason for doing that, investigative reason for doing that. I think it'll also be interesting. I want to hear them confirm that the cartridge that they found at the suicide scene matches the cartridge that was left behind at the apartment, at Celia's apartment. If it doesn't, you have a whole different dynamic here. So we'll see if they match.
Luis, were you able to get any information on Buddy Carr or on Walton as far as criminal history or anything like that?
No, I was. Again, just a very cursory search. Mr. Walton, pretty much, at least in just locally there in Charleston County area, just a couple of failure to pay. He was somewhat of a deadbeat dad. So he had a history of that. So in a cursory background on Buddy Carr, he has a history of being contacted for weapons, sales and delivery of weapons, possession of stolen weapons, and he also has a couple of arrests for possession of methamphetamine. So he's got a bit of a history there.
But wasn't Buddy Carr also a former Marine? Apparently he served for 6 years. Some people were looking at his Facebook profile, and one of the things they found very interesting were a lot of references and photos of the Hells Angels motorcycle gang.
Interesting. I don't know if he was a member, but he had an attraction to them, which is that in common. Doesn't mean that he associated with them, but maybe he liked to live that life mentally that he couldn't get in.
So Walton has had a bond hearing, and of course Celia's family members were there. She's originally from Boston. She had moved there probably about a year ago to Charleston, and the family member got a chance to say something publicly in the courtroom, and she said, "I think that you helped cover up what he did to her, and you could have chosen to help her, and you chose not to. You could have called the police. You had choices, and instead you helped hide her, and you caused so much pain." If that is all true, I believe that sums it up indeed. That's what he did.
I find that, besides being a powerful statement, actually, I'm not that familiar with what goes on in Charleston courts, but in California, that is very similar to a victim impact statement. And usually words like that are not spoken in court until after the individual has been convicted. To do that before here, I just don't understand how that was allowed. I have no idea how that happened. Maybe that's the norm, but that's very early in the investigation. And you saw how much media play that got, that scenario. And I believe it was the mother of Cecilia that said that. It was a family member, possibly the mother. It's just interesting. That really stuck out to me, that was allowed to happen, and it's getting a lot of play.
You know what? I have no problem with people speaking up before a case has actually gone to trial. I know everyone is, assumed, presumed innocent until proven guilty, but I got no problem with the community speaking up at things. Why do we not have an opportunity to say something when someone has clearly been murdered? There's no question about that. And he was there. I'm not saying he killed her, but he was there, so he must know something. I just sometimes feel that, and I know a lot of people are going to get upset, but I just feel that sometimes the rights of the families and the victims seem to be at the bottom of the list when it comes to rights.
Right. You're right. That's an interesting dynamic. Why is it such a huge difference between California and how they handle this in this courtroom?
Well, I'm sure we're going to get a lot more details when and if this goes to trial, and hopefully they'll be releasing a lot more details, which will help explain why in the world she was murdered. A young woman with her whole life ahead of her.